Okay, folks, welcome back to the Nick and Joe Show. I'm Nick, he's Joe, and we've been talking all kinds of fun stuff in the first part of the show. And this next segment, we're going to be getting into the budget. By the way, we're located here in Ottawa, in Ottawa, the capital of Canada, and broadcast center for the best doggone conservative talk show in the country, arguably even the world, because we have a worldwide audience. We have people from, are we on every continent yet?
Well, we're broadcasting over the internet, so yeah, we're on every continent, but I haven't seen any statistics from Antarctica yet.
I'm waiting for the space station to give us a shout.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't really know how we.
You think Mark Garneau could do anything for us?
Well,
no,
not after the next two segments.
Okay, we'll get him to do it now and then.
Oh dear. Mark Garneau. Yep. All right, so federal Liberals,
yes,
unveiled their first budget in 2 years this week on Monday. Actually, it was, and so we could spend a whole lot of time talking about a lot of different things, and there's just a lot to get into.
Well, the budget's over 700 pages long.
Yeah, it's a lot. So, but let's talk about the budget first as in sort of a macro sense, meaning, let's talk about it more generally. So we're looking at another 360 odd $billion in spending. That's in additional spending, I should say. So really, when you get that right down to it, we're talking now about somewhere in the order of $1.3 trillion of federal debt that by the time we get through the spending that's outlined in this budget, we will have accumulated. Now that's a lot of money. It's they say you can't wrap your mind around a million, let alone a billion. Well, think about $1 trillion. Okay,
what's that? 1,000 billion?
It's 1,000 billion. That's a lot of money, and what ends up happening is there's just no way to pay that back. Assuming that all of the spending comes to fruition and we actually have borrowed all of that money, because remember, a deficit is the borrowed money. It's not all the spending. The spending is somewhere around $600 or $700 billion. I just pulled that number. I think it's roughly in that area. It could be a little bit more than that. But so when you talk about a deficit, that's how much money you're spending more than you're bringing in revenue. So we were already running a deficit before this, and so this Liberal Party has now brought us not on the brink of. It would be wrong to say that we're on the brink of bankruptcy. I think that really understates the problem. Everybody can understand bankruptcy. It's hard for them to understand how a country could go bankrupt. It's possible, but everybody can understand bankruptcy. What they don't understand is the mechanisms that end up coming into play in order to find ways to help the government pay back these massive debts. And what they basically do is you allow some inflation to kick in, and the Bank of Canada agreement with the government is for an inflation rate of in the 2% range. That's their target inflation rate. So essentially, over 10 years, you devalue the aim of the government is to devalue the dollar by 20% in 10 years. So now, in 10 years, if you're still paying debt on a 10-year-old debt, you're paying it in devalued dollars. So essentially what you're doing is you're cheating the people that you've actually borrowed the money from. It's kind of like buying you buy a Canada Savings bond, right? So you buy a Canada Savings bond at, say, 3% or whatever it is for 5 years, okay?
Right.
Okay. But if inflation is 3%,
You're going nowhere.
You're going nowhere with it. Okay?
If it's 4%, you're losing money.
Exactly. In fact, I remember having a conversation with a bank, an agent trying to sell us mutual funds once a few years back, and they were telling me, well, okay, you invest this in GICs, and it's 1.1% per year or whatever, and I'm going, yeah, but the inflation is like 1.9%. They said, well, so. I said, well, why would I put my money into a GIC? Why would I give you my money? I might as well just put it in a savings account and not use it.
Well, stuff it between the mattresses. You get more use out of it.
It'll be the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is, it'll decrease in value slower if I'm investing in it and I'm getting an interest rate. But why wouldn't I find
it's still going backwards?
3 or 4 or 5%, right?
You're just drowning more slowly.
That's right. So look here. Bottom line is this: it is a government policy to devalue our currency gradually over a period of time, and that actually helps them to pay off debt. Now, what ends up happening is you lose control of that devaluation, okay? And that's not I'm already seeing this, for instance, okay? I was reading today the inflation rate was somewhere up around 2.2 or 2.3%. From over the last year, annualized in March, and they were talking about how this was largely due to the increase in fuel prices, right?
Right.
Okay. See, I've been in this business for too long now. I've seen all the tricks. So here's the trick with that, right? The cost of living might have gone up because of the increase in fuel prices. But the increase in fuel prices is not due to inflation. The increase in fuel prices is due to the carbon tax that's been imposed on fossil fuels, okay? So people are going to look at this and go, oh, man, inflation, right? It's not inflation. It's increased taxes. Inflation is always, people confuse this, okay? Inflation is always about the value of your dollar. So it's a money supply issue more than anything. It's not the more money that you create and circulate in order to pay bills and things like that, or to quote unquote stimulate the economy, sounds like a great idea. But if the value of your dollar goes down as a consequence of that, okay, then that's the price increases that are the result of that devalued dollar. That's what inflation is. So don't blame inflation because your gas prices went up, because that's not inflation, my friends. That's your carbon tax for you.
Hasn't crude oil prices been rather stable over the last little while?
Well, they went down quite a bit a year ago.
They sure did,
and then they've basically recovered now.
Yeah,
but you're paying here in Ottawa. We're paying about $1.25 to $1.30,
which is like $6 a gallon.
Okay, for gas. Which is what, 15-20 cents more than we were paying before that dip in prices a year ago, right? Mm-hmm. So the fuel prices have recovered somewhat, okay, not entirely, but close to, but we're paying a lot more in fuel than we were last year at this time. Well, we were paying a lot more in fuel than we were on average before.
Now, the price again, this whole idea of putting a carbon tax on fuel is counterintuitive, because if you really care about the economy, and obviously our present federal leadership couldn't care less, you would reduce the cost, your share of the cost, to a minimum on the number one thing we need in order to make our economy work, and that's cheap energy prices. By driving down the price of energy, you allow for growth in those sectors, like transportation is a vital sector to our economy simply because of the vastness of the country. When I used to drive tractor trailer out of Leamington with, let's say, bell peppers from Master and Artie's greenhouses up to the food market, excuse me, in Toronto, that was about a 4-hour trip. And I would burn, I don't know, I was getting 7 miles to the gallon. And in those days, diesel was about 36 cents a gallon. Well, it's a lot more. It's 36 cents a liter. It's a lot more than that now. So the cost of that increase between, and I don't know what it is now, it's probably around $1 or more. But that cost has to be borne by the taxpayer, which doesn't have as much money to spend in the economy because it's being eaten up by this tax and by the added cost that it brings. So reduce that, allow companies to make more money, hire more people, put more trucks on the road, and make the economy work. It's really very basic. You don't need to be an economics genius. If I can figure this out, good Lord, what could, somebody who actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to money figure out?
Yeah, well, this has been an ongoing argument among economists for, decades and decades now, and that is, the value of government spending, and then you put in multipliers, etc. And the whole idea being that if the government borrows money and then injects it into the economy, then you're going to have a multiplier effect. It's not going to be like $1 that the government puts into the economy in government spending gives you $1 value. There's spin-offs from that, and that's the argument. So the problem is that the people who make that argument don't consider the opposite or the reverse argument, and that is for every dollar that you put into the economy, you have to tax $1 out. And for the dollar you've taxed out, what is the spin-off
of the loss?
The multiplier effect of the dollar that you've taxed out of the economy. So how do they get away with that? Well, we're not actually taxing the money, we're borrowing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what taxes part of the argument. And my response to that is, but borrowed money is just deferred taxation.
Especially when you're government.
Either way, look, if my income as an individual goes up by 10% every year, okay, then I can afford to spend more money, to borrow money and spend money every year, knowing that I'm going to be able to pay as those debts come due. I'm going to be able to pay them off because of my increased income every year, okay? So that's kind of the argument that they're using, plus they're paying off the debt with, as I say, devalued dollars. So remember, okay, that when I use the 20% over 10 years, but some of these debts are 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, okay? When you start looking at devalued dollars, it actually really makes a difference. But there are problems with that. One of probably the biggest problem with it, other than the fact that you're not considering the economic impact of taxing that dollar out of the economy, okay, is that you're failing to also take into account the fact that the economy goes up and down in cycles.
Well, think about this. What they're banking on is a stable lending rate.
That's true too.
And if that lending rate were to rise even 1 point, what kind of impact would that have when you're talking billions of dollars on the federal budget? Speaking which is what we're supposed to be talking about, by the way.
Well, and we are talking about it, and I hope not in too abstract terms. Now, why would the rate of interest go up? Well, interest rate's going to go up if inflation goes up, because because if you're lending money, okay, and the inflation rate is, well, let's just take a number. The inflation rate is 2% right now. Let's say it's 2%. It's a little over that, but okay, so it's 2%, right? So I'm lending money. What am I going to do? Am I going to lend that money out at 2% per year? Of course not. I'm going to lend it out at 3 or 4% per year. I have to. If I lend it out at 2% per year,
you're not going anywhere.
Any money on the money I've lent, right?
That's right.
Okay, so now if inflation climbs to 5%, okay.
Now you're going backwards.
Well, now I have to lend the money out at 6 or